Hey there, and welcome to the very first episode, the trailer episode of the Napkin Notes Podcast. I'm Elizabeth, and I'm literally thrilled that you're here. If you have been following along on the journey since the 2018, 2019 timeframe when I started my podcast production agency, you'll know that this show is a long time coming, has been a long time coming, and I'm thrilled to actually be with you here today. So if we haven't met before, please know that if we are meeting for the first time, let's say in person, because I know first encounters and first meetings can be kind of awkward, I would be handing you a glass of champagne the moment that you walk through the door, or maybe one of my world famous, this is a self-proclaimed title, margaritas that I make, or your favorite non-alcoholic bubbly beverage, because in my opinion, the best conversations are always had over your favorite drink. I am coming to you today from my living room in Austin, Texas. I moved here about a year and a half ago from Nashville, Tennessee, and that does spark a lot of conversation of why the move, what was kind of the impetus behind that. And moving to Austin was really my second big life move. And I have a little bit of gotten the art down and the science down of moving to a new city and making new friends and kind of integrating yourself. So maybe that will be some content for some future episodes. But today, coming to you from Austin, Texas, it is so hot. I will say that is the biggest change between Nashville to Austin is the temps. If it's under a 100-degree day, we're having a good day here in Austin. But in the summer, honestly, this does not happen very often. So like I said, I started my podcast production agency around 2019. So if our paths have crossed before, I would assume it is probably because you have listened to one of my clients' podcasts, a lot of stuff in the lifestyle categories, personal development, Christian categories. So I'm assuming that that is maybe where our paths have crossed previously. We'll definitely get into that at a later date. But for today, I would love to chat about picking up the breadcrumbs of our lives and just sort of identifying some of these different things to then figure out a way to craft a memorable and unique and bold and courageous future for ourselves. Because I think we can all use at times just a little bit of help identifying these pieces of our lives that maybe we dropped along the way, pieces of ourselves that we really loved and cherished. And for whatever reason or another, whether it was a life trial or just busy schedules, we're all busy these days, we start to lose some of these characteristics that we just once loved in ourselves, and helping to remember who we were before the world told us who to be. Because I think sometimes you actually do have to look back to know what to do moving forward. So let's swing back in time a little bit, back to when I was in fourth grade. A little bit is a generous way to put that. But back in fourth grade, I won an art drawing contest for, I think it was the whole northern half of Virginia. So I grew up in Virginia, and it was ironic. I was not the best artist or the best painter, but I guess my art teacher had entered me into this contest, and I had drawn a poster to put out the message of like against drinking and driving. Mature content for a fourth grader, but this was one, it was the 90s, and two, this is when DARE was a big thing in school. So for all of you guys who remember that, DARE, I guess, was just what was happening that year. So I won this art drawing contest, but because of that, and I guess because of the message on there, a news station actually came in and asked to interview me. Now, in fourth grade, this was a big deal to have a news station come in, but I just remember this moment so vividly because the fluorescent lights were on. There were the blue handrails down the hallway, which I'm sure I thought were just so much bigger back then when I was just a little fourth grader. But the interviewer came in and the camera guy, and we just chatted for a couple minutes for the nightly segment. And I remember thinking, I think I'm supposed to be nervous right now, but I just felt really comfortable on camera. So we chatted, the camera guy put all of his stuff down. I remember that being huge, which I'm sure it was compared to today's standards. But the female interviewer pulled my mom aside afterwards to be like, hey, this, as a fourth grader, she's very engaging in conversation and was just a really great conversationalist and was really comfortable on camera in case that's something that you just want to instill in her a little bit later on. And so for me, that was something that I didn't think a lot of at the time, but it's still a memory that was so vivid to me thinking back to that. And so this story will kind of come into play in a little bit, but I do still remember just being so enamored by the fact that we could have a conversation and then all of these other people could hear it later. So fast forward, again, I'll use the word a little bit, to it's about the 2014 timeframe. I was a couple years out of college. I didn't graduate with anything creative. My major was economics and my math was in minor in statistics. So about as straightforward science and mathy as you could get. And I remember thinking I was really proud of myself for continuing through this journey and doing all the right things and pursuing a job that was making money and more money than most of my peers. But I was still left feeling so unfulfilled. And one of my coworkers pulled me aside and he knew how I was feeling about stuff. And he just asked me, Elizabeth, if time and money were not an obstacle, what would you do? I felt a little embarrassed by my answer because it wasn't concise or clear or even just like it didn't have a specific answer. But what I did respond with was, I think it has something to do with question asking. And I even think it has something to do with maybe interviewing, but I really love asking questions. About as vague of an answer as you could get when you're trying to dream big. But I remember him kind of looking at me like, okay, sure, that sounds good. And I don't blame him. I probably would have had the same response. But that was something that I kept in my heart all of those years because it did feel that important. It felt important enough to hold on to, even though I had no idea what that meant at the time. So we'll fast forward just one last time, and it was 2016 when I initially moved to Nashville. And I was still working that 9 to 5 initially, and I still had this feeling that I just wanted to do something a little bit more creative, something different. But during all of this time, I still hadn't uncovered exactly what that was. And so I don't know if it's the glamour of Nashville or just being around these iconic country music artists, but I ended up starting what is now going to be my business. But at that point in time, it was just one client. And so I started out with just one client, helping her with a little bit of marketing. So email marketing, a little bit of copywriting for her website, and then social media. What was interesting about this client is when I saw that she was needed some contract work, I submitted a video to tell a story on camera, and she ended up hiring me. I was terrified. It was my first client, and she was also an artist painting client. And so I loved working alongside of her. I kept my 9 to 5, and at nights I would just put all of these creative ideas together. And I was like, okay, I feel like I'm finally starting to gain some momentum. But it wasn't until I met randomly what would soon be a client in a coffee shop in Franklin, Tennessee, that asked me what I was doing on my laptop. I told her what I was doing with marketing and copywriting. And she said, can what you do for this painting artist, can you do for me and this podcast I'm about to launch? It was then that all of the pieces started to fall into place, from question asking to recording to wanting to inspire conversations that millions of people could tune into. Did it really start to click and make sense? That podcast went on to hit number 2 on what was the iTunes charts at that point in time. And that's truly where the agency was birthed. We've gone on now to produce dozens, if not almost hundreds of shows at this point. We've launched dozens of top podcasts that have accumulated millions of downloads. But this has not come without a lot of hard work, a lot of self-discovery and self-doubt and self-discovery and that whole iterative process. But all of the hard work only made sense once I started to kind of retroactively look at all of those breadcrumbs together. So if we haven't met yet, I would love to take a quick time here to introduce myself. I'm Elizabeth, owner of Elizabeth Evans Media. I am from Fredericksburg, Virginia, and then started my agency in Nashville, Tennessee, and now I am living in Austin, Texas. I go for long walks on more days than I don't. I will probably ask you, how are you feeling, more than even your therapist? And I love to host gatherings and help people commune together, especially over a good cocktail. But I just have such a heart for question asking and having people come together. I tell you these random yet still connected stories because I feel like finding ourselves in adulthood a lot of times looks like getting back to who we were as a child and going back and remembering and picking up these pieces that we lost along the way. And kind of like what I was saying at the top of this episode, that we just start to drop, whether it's life trials or difficult schedules or things just get really full. And we kind of wake up one day and think, oh my gosh, have I lost my personality? I'm not the person that I used to be. And that's where I want to meet you today. If that is something that you can resonate with, I want to help inspire us to all start on that journey to truly craft a memorable future. It's not an easy journey by any means, but I think it is one of the most fulfilling and reflective processes that we can go on. And I think there's two main reasons that we don't start at all. Like we don't even start on this process, and we don't stop to reflect how much that maybe we want and desire that version of ourselves back. And I think to me, there's two reasons. And the first one, in my opinion, is we think that we have to make the right decision right now. And that if we don't, then time will be wasted. And this used to be me. I used to think, oh, I'm just going to kind of push off actually committing to something, because what if it's wrong, and what if I waste my time? But I'm here to tell you, you are not wasting your time. That non-linear journey that I took to start the business, I needed all of those steps to even get here with you today. I like to think about it like the harvesting season of a tree. We'll use an apple tree because apple picking is one of my favorite things to do, especially in the fall, but obviously you can only do it in the fall. But the way that I like to think about it is that trees were created for their branches to bend. So as more fruit accumulates and starts to ripen and grow, obviously the branches get heavier, but they were built to bend. Now, once the tree branch gets too heavy, it will break. And that's what you really want to avoid, because once the tree branches break, that's going to cause way more damage. So there's something that people do called the thinning process, not the pruning necessarily, but the thinning process when the fruit is growing on the trees and it's harvesting season, it's picking season. But what they'll do is they will take the fruit that is already ripe, that could technically be good fruit, and they take it off of those tree branches so that the branches will not break. They will only bend, so they can only carry the amount of weight that they can in that particular time. And so while it might seem like you are wasting the additional fruit, it is time that is extremely well spent, because that way the branches can bend, but they will not break. And so that's what I always think of when I feel like I'm in a season that does not have any fruit to show. It is not a wasted season. It's just a season that God has given you as much as you can hold, and the right fruit for that season. And so that's how I like to think about it, is there's different fruit for different seasons, but no time is ever wasted. So action provides clarity. Even if it doesn't provide fruit right away, God's going to give you the fruit in the right season to know what to do next. So don't think that you only have one shot to make a dream come true, or you have to get something perfect before you even start. The fruit will come in the right season, and sometimes it is a harvest that is plentiful, and sometimes it is a season that is thinning, but either way, your time is never wasted. And I think the second reason that keeps us from really reflecting back to be able to craft a future that we love is that we are our own biggest blind spots. I see this all the time in clients that I'm working with when they're first launching their shows, they're first launching their podcasts, is they're afraid that they don't have anything original to provide. And I think being our own biggest blind spots hinders us from seeing our originality and what we really have to bring. I love being able to help coach people, not only through the tech and the microphones and all that goes into a podcast. I love getting to the heart of their message and their story so that they can show their originality. And it's like this light bulb moment comes on for them. The way that I like to think about this as well is we'll go back to, I actually think I wasn't born yet. My mom was in her 20s. I'm going to tell you a story about my mom. She is an amazing decorator and has such an awesome eye for design, specifically in the home. If you guys follow me on Insta, you're going to see, one, her funny B-rolls while I'm recording these episodes with guests. But two, her house is such a delight to look at. But when she was younger, she was again in her 20s. She was living in downtown Fredericksburg, and it was Christmas time. And we were having something called the candlelight tour. You might have one in your town as well, but it's just for people to kind of come in and see your home and all of it, how beautifully decorated it is. But in this particular season, people from Southern Living magazine were coming through to take photos for their Christmas hardbacked book. And so they asked for people to stay in the homes in case Southern Living wanted to come in. Now, my mom, at this point in time, she had really DIY'd her house and had hand painted different tiles on the floor and had put up different types of garland. And so while the home looked beautiful, she had no expectation that Southern Living would choose her home. So she had decided she wasn't even going to wait around. So she went to, I believe, I don't know if she was taking my sister out or maybe going to eat dinner somewhere, but she decided to leave the house. And as she was leaving, Southern Living approached and said, "Hey, can we just go ahead and look at your home before you leave?" So Southern Living comes in. of course, falls in love with my mom's original design and decor eye. And they ended up choosing her home as one of the homes to photograph to go into that season's hardback Southern Living book. It was in that moment, I think it helped her realize, oh, maybe I do have a better original design eye than she even initially anticipated. And I think that is so true for us as well. We have these original ideas and we view the world in such a unique way and perspective. But sometimes it takes an extra person, an outside person, to identify that and encourage that in you. And these are truly the things for me that are the heartbeat of this show. I want to get back to who we were as a child to craft a really amazing future. And I want to eliminate these two reasons of thinking that we have to get it right the first time or otherwise we're wasting time, or being unable to see our originality because we are our own biggest blind spots. This is the heartbeat of this show, and I hope to be able to journey alongside of you in that. So I'm going to be pairing this mission with conversations with our favorite brands and businesses in the fashion, design, decor, hospitality, food industries to be able to help us craft that, hear their inspiring stories to inspire us into action. And all along the way, I want this to create a really strong community to do that exact thing that that Southern Living magazine did for my mom, was to help identify her originality and highlight her giftings. I want us to do that for each other as well in this community so that our original ideas can be highlighted and executed and just loved on. I'll be chatting with content creators and authors and musicians and those with a heart of hospitality and generosity and connection so we can hear their stories and be inspired to live out our own lives in the best way possible. Of course, we're going to be talking to people with great taste. I want us to giggle along the way because I really want this to be a comfort show in your week. I want these conversations to instill hope and enjoyment and highlight our giftings. And I hope it makes you want to call your mom afterwards or text your best friend just to let them know that you're thinking of them. I'm kind of thinking of it as like a fabulous girls gathering with maybe a touch of business mastermind and a sprinkle of therapy, all of our favorite things, but I mostly want us to giggle and leave inspired. And this also feels important to say. So while my guests will have varying and differing backgrounds, my perspective will always come from a Christ-centered biblical perspective. I became a Christian at a young age, and then my faith really matured in my 20s. And so anything I put out personally will always be coming through that lens and that perspective. It's just so much infused into who I am, so that will always be a part of the fabric and the framework of content that I'm putting out. You'll hear in the second week of release where the name Napkin Notes came from. It was during a recording with a guest after I'd already started down a different direction that this popped into conversation. And you'll see us both light up and say, oh, this is the direction I should be taking. And that is on action coming from clarity coming from action. New episodes will release every Thursday. And if you're listening to this on launch day, there is already another episode waiting for you there with Olivia Adrians. It's an amazing conversation. You'll hear a little bit more about how my business started and really how she got to over 1 million followers within her community. It's a truly incredible story that she tells. And while you're in your podcast player, if you could go hit that plus or follow button in your podcast app, this will subscribe you to the show. So 1, you'll never miss an episode, but 2, it is truly the best way to support podcasters and your hosts as they continue to go along on this journey and releasing content. So if you could hit the plus sign or follow button to subscribe in your podcast app, that would mean the world to me. So now looking back, I didn't realize that compliment in 4th grade about my conversational skills on camera would ultimately turn into creating an agency where conversations would be heard by millions of people around the world. And I didn't realize that vague dream of wanting to help ask questions and carve out interviews, I didn't realize that dream would turn into being able to craft conversations for some of my favorite authors and musicians growing up. And I didn't realize that meeting a random content creator in Franklin, Tennessee at a coffee shop would turn into an amazing podcast production agency. And I can't wait to see the future conversations I record with my clients. And I feel like all of these things have led to this point today for me to release this podcast as well. It is such an honor to sit down with the people that I've been chatting with, and it is an honor that you would be listening today. I am so excited and so humbled, a little bit scared, but just so thrilled to be able to have these conversations myself. And I want to do the best job that I can to put out content for all of us to be able to live out the most full lives that we possibly can. So thank you so much for being here. Again, I didn't know all of these things along the way would turn into what they have now. And the same is true for you, friend. You don't know what yesterday's childhood dreams could potentially turn into for tomorrow's reality. But what do you say we find out? I'm Elizabeth, and this is the Napkin Notes Podcast.